Do you live alone or have you ever lived alone? Do you have a lot of fear around living alone? Maybe you like it, maybe you hate it. Maybe you're afraid of potentially having to live alone at some point in your life. There's a lot of issues around living alone. And what's interesting is I published a short about what the things I enjoyed about living alone a few weeks ago. And it really got pushed out there and I got a lot of, positive likes and all that. But I also got a lot of comments and dislikes, I think, from people who assumed that living alone meant you were totally alone in life. In other words, you were just isolated. And it doesn't mean that at all. So when I talk about living alone, I'm talking about just living alone, not about not having friends, or that's a whole other issue that we can address sometime. But it's really just about choosing to live alone, having your own living space just to yourself. So you still have friends, you still have family, you socialize with people. It doesn't mean that you're never going to see people. So living alone historically is kind of an interesting concept. For those of you who don't know this on this channel, I'm also a master's level anthropologist, and I taught anthropology, cultural anthropology, in community college. And I was always fascinated by the fact that throughout most of human history, which is really probably 98% of human history, we have been hunter-gatherers or nomadic people. And by definition, we were never alone. In fact, being outcast from your group was tantamount to a death sentence because you basically couldn't survive for a lot of that time alone. There were other groups that you had to be afraid of. There were wild animals you had to be afraid of. And being alone would have been very dangerous. So people did live in large extended family groups. And then when we settled down and all of that, people still tended to live with other people. A lot of that was economic, because people couldn't really afford to just have their own house or apartment or something like that. So people still lived in extended family groups, even in my mother's generation. She grew up in a family where a lot of times they had aunts or uncles or even grandparents living with them. That was not at all unusual in the 1930s and even the 1940s. But things have changed in the last 50, 60 years. And so now you see more and more people living alone than probably ever before, at least in Western culture. I'm going to make a distinction because in Eastern cultures or developing nations, you see a different pattern. But at least in Western culture, which is considered to be Europe, North America, Australia, New Zealand, maybe a couple of other countries, you see a lot of people living alone in older age, for one thing, but also even younger people. And so it's become a more dominant phenomenon than it ever was. Now, 100 years ago, I doubt most people would have thought about living alone or even desired living alone, to be honest with you. But I think some people find it desirable now. And so that's one of the reasons I'm doing this video. So that's a little bit of the history thing of it. So the thing is living alone has its disadvantages, and I'm definitely going to talk about that in a little bit. But it has a lot of advantages, especially for people who are introverts. People, by definition, an introvert is somebody who likes to spend a lot of time alone. And if you like to spend a lot of time alone, you really enjoy having your own space. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to mean like you live just solo in your own house. It could mean you just have a part of your house and you go to that and you spend a lot of your day there. So, but if you just live in an apartment or something, obviously it's nice to have your own space. Now, going back to my own kind of personal relationship with this, I didn't ever really lived alone much until I was in my mid-40s. So before that time, I grew up, I had family. I had my parents, and then I just had my mother in my later teens. And then I went off to college and I had a roommate, and then I got married at the age of 24, and then I had a husband, and then I had another husband, and then I had a boyfriend. And so for a lot of years, I didn't live alone. Maybe little brief, months here and there. And so I didn't really realize all the advantages of living alone. But my mother used to talk about it because she was alone from the time I left home until she died, basically. And she never got remarried after my father died. And so she lived alone for a long time. And she used to always tell me, "Oh, I love living alone. I just love it so much." And I'd be like, "Really? Aren't you lonely?" And disclaimer on that, being alone, living alone does not mean you're lonely. It's not the same thing. You can live alone for years and years and years and never be lonely. So let me just say that. But I didn't realize that at one time. So my mother, no, she raved about it. She loved living alone. And I used to ask her what she loved about it. And she said, "Well, I can do anything I want when I want it. I can be however I want to be in my own space. I don't have to do anything for anyone else at that time. I can just, and I guess now I get it. At the time, I didn't really understand it because the first time I talked to my mom about it, I probably was married and my son was little, and I couldn't even imagine living alone at that time. Well, I do get it. And for the last 23 years, I have lived alone. And at first, it wasn't by choice. It was because of a breakup of a long-term relationship, and it was actually quite traumatic for me. But after that, as time went on and I got adjusted to it, I started really enjoying living alone. I really did. And now I can't imagine living with someone else. I just can't. Male or female. I can't imagine living with someone else. If I did, I would definitely have to have my own dedicated space, my own room and bathroom and that sort of thing. But I really can't imagine living with someone else. Now, obviously, circumstances could, make that likely or even demand it. I don't know. Hopefully, we'll see. I don't have to do that. But that's, by the way, one of the challenges of getting older is that you have to think about, will I need someone around as I get older or anything else? So there's a lot of other issues, but I'm not really going to go into a lot of that today. So, what are the things I love about living alone? Okay, so I kind of divided these into two categories. What I call the superficial and what I call the deeper reasons. Okay, so in my little short that I did, I kind of just dealt with the superficial reasons, which are things like you can get up when you want to and go to bed when you want to. You can watch whatever you want to, and you don't have to worry about when you're watching it or who you're watching it with. You don't have to worry about that. You can obviously dress however you want to around the house. In fact, some people, not me, but some people walk around nude or whatever. They enjoy that. That's great for them. So you can also eat whatever you want to. You can have your own food in the fridge. It's you don't have to, unless you're having somebody over for dinner or something, you don't normally have to cook for more than just you. And some people don't enjoy that. Some people actually enjoy cooking for a lot of people. But I'm just saying it makes it really easy when you only have to think about, oh, what do I want for lunch or dinner or whatever. And so those are some of what I would consider the more superficial reasons for enjoying living alone. In other words, they're significant, but they don't really get to the core of what you can really love about living alone. So the deeper reasons, and I'm going to refer to my little paper here so that I make sure I don't miss any of these. For people that are especially introverts, it's having more alone time. When you actually live alone, you can just shut your door and lock your door, and you're in your own little cocoon. You're in your own little hideaway, and you basically can be alone with your thoughts, with, your hobbies, whatever you're doing, and you don't have to think about anything else. And that's really important to a lot of people who define as introverts. You just also get a lot more quiet time. It's very quiet. I'm a person that I really like things, Unless I'm listening to music or playing music or watching a movie or something, I like quiet sometimes. And you can dictate when you have quiet time, basically. More time for introspection. In other words, you have a lot of time, like for myself, I meditate, and that's where I do a lot of my, kind of creative thought processes come up while I'm meditating. But it's time just to be introspective. You can sit and plan things. You can, think about any number of issues in your life and go to a deeper level with them because you aren't going to get interrupted. It's just more peaceful. It's just more peaceful. The fewer people you have around, it's just peaceful. And I know a lot of people just don't understand that because to them, joy is being surrounded by their family or friends or whatever. I get it. If that's your thing, you enjoy that. But it is very peaceful when you just don't have to think about or talk to or interact with someone else. So very peaceful. And then another big issue that I think is important why I enjoy living alone is there's nobody around to like argue with. I know that sounds weird, but usually when you live with family or a spouse or something like that, and most people have inevitable arguments or they have to make concessions about things or someone's criticizing them or there's something going on. There's some sort of, it's not all sunshine and rainbows, okay? There's definitely a lot of conflict that can occur when you live with someone else. And you don't get that when you live alone, unless you do it with yourself, which that's a whole other video if you're creating conflict for yourself. But if you don't have somebody else to have that, dynamic with, it's great. You don't have somebody else criticizing you. You don't have someone else demanding something of you. And so it's such a relief, and you can dictate when you do want to interact with someone. So let me get to that now because yeah, obviously the downside of living alone. You thought I was going to end this video without talking about the negatives because there are some, and there's a pretty significant one, which is that sometimes, no matter whether you're an introvert or not, you really want someone there. You want someone to be with. You want someone to talk to. And you may not be always able to do that when you don't live with them. In other words, you try to call a friend and they're not available. Or you want to have you call someone up or text them or whatever and you want to do something, but they can't do something. So you don't always get to be with people when you want to be with people. And sometimes you need that emotionally or practically in your life, and you need that in your life. That is, to me, probably one of the biggest downsides to living alone because it happens. Most of the time I'm fine. Once in a while, though, I have a day where I think, gosh, I'd really like to hang out with somebody or have a real heart-to-heart with somebody, but there's just somebody's not available that day or something, so it happens. It happens when you live alone. But I would still rather deal with that problem than deal with the problem of having somebody around all the time where it creates a lot more conflict and just stress in general. So it's a balancing act, but I still would rather deal with that. And the thing is, you can be with somebody. Again, as going back to what people construed from the short I did, living alone doesn't mean you're being antisocial. You're not like ruling people out of your life. I mean, some people might even do that. I'm not saying they don't. And that's fine. If that's what they want, then that's fine. But I do like to be with people sometimes, and I do like to talk with people sometimes, and you just figure out how to arrange that. You get together with friends, or you go down and sit at a cafe or a coffee house or something like that. Or in my case, sometimes I play music with someone else. So that's what you do so that you're not alone all the time. Because being alone all the time, while some people really enjoy that, it has some additional dangers to it as well or issues related to it. So anyway, I just wanted to come on here and tell you that's what I think is so great about living alone. I would love to hear your thoughts on it, whether you live alone or don't live alone. Drop a comment below. Let me know what your situation is. I would love to hear it. There's no one right way to do anything. There just isn't. There's no one right way to live. So living alone is not necessarily right for everybody. Living with other people is not necessarily right for everybody. So keep that in mind. And until next time, be well. Keep moving forward. Take care.